At LinkedIn, we know hiring is a big deal for your small business. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming. LinkedIn uses data that you can't find anywhere else to give you the best candidates, all so you can feel confident you're hiring the best person for the job. And even a little hiring bliss. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Brewers Outlet, Sunbury Motor Company, and Purdy Insurance. Now, from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
This half hour brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket, imports, domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere, wine coolers, water, soft drinks, snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and out every day, 6 great flavors of slushies. And now, ready to drink cocktails, High Noon, Jack Daniels, Crown Royal, and the Pickle Bar led by the Barrels and the Dills, indeed second to none. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Always a privilege to be joined by the outstanding Mark Brennan. Mark, welcome back. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Always enjoy it.
Yeah, let's start with this. We lost a great friend this week in Lou Prato. I know I talked a lot about him yesterday. Mark, what were your thoughts on somebody who had such an impact on so many?
Oh, boy. Steve, so many people know him as the curator and founder of the Penn State All Sports Museum. And, we knew him before that. And, as a journalist, to have Lou as a mentor and a role model was just unbelievable. I wrote a little something, and the one thing I said, Steve, was that his career as a reporter in the media was different than mine. I mean, obviously, he did a lot of work in television and radio. He taught. He wrote books. I worked in magazines and, now in the online realm. But the things that Lou stood for, toughness, telling the truth, honesty, compassion, fairness, integrity, those things they should apply to everybody in the media. Mm-hmm. And I know that I've taken that to heart. I know you've taken it to heart. I know so many people Lou has touched have taken those things to heart. These weren't things that he told you. This was the way he lived. And it's made that much more important to me now. And I hate to get up on a soapbox, but I think it's true. When you look around the media landscape now and see so many places where those integral things are missing. And that, to me, from a professional standpoint, was what Lou was all about. And then, obviously, on a personal standpoint, I'm sure you've gotten into this. It was one of those situations where he did a lot of writing for us.
Yeah.
And, ultimately, you have a professional relationship, and then ultimately, just like I hope me and you become friends with somebody.
Exactly.
And that's one of the great things about being in this business. And I know you're the same way. There are people I've worked with who have become competitors that I'm still great friends with. Right. Lou wrote for us for a while, then he wrote for competitors, but we remained friends throughout the whole thing. And for Stacy, my wife, and I to be able to spend time with Lou and Carol, going out to dinner or meeting up at social events, it was just unreal. And if I could say one more thing, Steve, I know I'm taking a lot of time, but Lou meant so much, and I hope I don't break up, but he wasn't at as many things in recent years. But whenever he was, he would come over to me, and the first thing he always told me was what a great job my daughter was doing as a photographer.
Yep.
And wow.
Yeah.
And the second thing was he would ask about Stacy. And then the third thing my wife. And then the third thing, and I'll pull myself together, is whatever the most recent thing I wrote, he would talk to me about. He may praise it. He may be critical of it. He may just want to discuss it. He may want to ask about something I missed. But he was letting you know, because sometimes, you know this, Steve, sometimes you don't know, are people reading my stuff? Are people listening to me when I'm on the air? You know what I mean? Well, you wouldn't know that because you're a star. But for somebody like me.
Oh, please.
But he was kind of, in all seriousness, I'm joking about that, but he was kind of validating, hey, Mark, someone's paying attention, and someone is willing to give you feedback. And, boy, how important is that? And the thing is, that wasn't just me, Steve, and you know it, because he read everything, he listened to everything, and he saw everything. Yeah. He gave that same sort of feedback to every single person in the media that he touched, that he knew, and that he became friends with. And I say all that stuff from a media perspective because everybody knew Lou as later in his life as a Penn State Goodwill ambassador, and he was. But he was more than that to a lot of us in the media.
Oh. So I saw Lou every week at the Quarterback Club, along with Carol. Always sat in the same spots, and every time I walked in, I would always make sure I spent time with Lou. Hoops Club, same thing. Lou was at the Hoops Club last week, Mark.
Yeah.
Right? So, but there was the Duquesne Club. I would take, now it's out at Chartiers, and Jack Ham and I always speak at it. But Lou would always go, and I would take him. And, Mark, that's 2.5 hours down, 2.5 hours back. I got 5 golden hours with Lou in the car just talking.
Yeah.
And
well, we've been so lucky, Steve, because he would go with me to tape the Nitwits TV show that we do, and I also was fortunate that I had Fran Fisher to do that with.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I mean, just think about that. I mean, my God, I don't know if at the time we realized how lucky we were, right? I mean, that now you do, but it's like, oh my God, these are like living legends. These are icons.
I know. And I felt the same way. You're like, and the most important part is listening. Yeah. I love listening to Fran. I love listening to Lou. Felt like you learned so much. And here's a great lesson for Lou, for any young person that wants to do anything. Lou really took to heart what Joe Paterno told us 1,000 times. Take care of the little things, and the big things take care of themselves. Lou was meticulous in trying to make sure he got everything right because he didn't want any little item to slip through. And then the big thing, like the encyclopedia or a book or a museum, would take care of itself because he took care of the little things. I mean, a guy is combing through a closet in Rec Hall trying to find the Penn State Final Four trophy, and he found it. That's Lou Prato because he knew it was the right thing to do.
Whenever I needed a photo for one of the historical pieces he was doing for us, I'd be like, Lou, I can't find a good photo of Mother Dunn. All that's out there is one that everybody's used.
Right, yeah.
Somehow, within like 2 hours, Mark, I got that photo for you,
He's something else.
The other thing, Steve, when you talk about the little things, but how about treating people the right way?
Oh.
And again, it's up on my soapbox, but we've lost so much of that. And this was a guy, always a smile, always a handshake, always a pat on the back, knew your name, knew your family. I mean, just treated people the right way. I mean, I'm so blessed to have known him. My family's so blessed to have known him. Just a special human being.
And by the way, I think I've told you a few times, Grace is doing a great job. But my son Mike ended up working for him at the All Sports Museum, and he loved Mike. I mean, Lou didn't like Mike. Lou loved Mike.
Yeah.
Same thing with Carol. Every time, how's Mike? What's Mike doing? All the time, right? You wanted to know because people meant something to him, right? And it wasn't the people you don't want to deal with are the ones that walk up and they're shaking your hand and they're looking for the next one to shake.
Right.
And
that's not Lou.
That wasn't Lou. And that's what I always said about Franco Harris. Why was Franco always late? Other than the fact that Franco was always late. Right? Okay? Right? But Franco Harris would pull you aside and he wanted to know more about you, which meant a longer conversation, which meant he ended up being late. So,
right.
But that's something special about it. You know, there's a curiosity. Great, great man. Great, dearly, dearly missed. It will be forever missed. You know, by you, me, and a long list of people. I will start with basketball. I was talking earlier. Dick Girardi now, and I've now seen this has been one of those seasons where all the close games have happened and they didn't swing Penn State's way.
Yeah.
We feel like for us in watching it, and I want to find out what you think, that in the time and score realm, especially when they're behind, they don't have a sense of time, score, and they rush. And in rushing, you don't make the right play. And we feel like they rush too often because there's not a great concept of time and score. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And, you know, I think part of it, Ace Baldwin is a tremendous player. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that he's realized what his role on this team needed to be this year, because for most of his career, he's not only been somebody who was an assist man, but a primary scorer. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to shift gears from that. I don't think it was a coincidence that if you look at the two games that Penn State won recently, I think he took a total of 8 or 9 or 10 shots, something like that.
Yeah.
And when he becomes the primary scoring option, that's where I think things get out of whack. Mm-hmm. And, again, I'm not putting this all on him because it's a team effort.
No, but I know what you're saying.
I looked at early in that game, Steve, yesterday.
Yep.
And when they had Yannick, the ball going to and through him, mm-hmm. things were working. He had, 5 shots in the first 8 minutes, and then he had 4 or 5 shots the rest of the game.
Yes.
And that's where I just don't think everybody ever quite got on the same page with each other, because there are other viable scoring options. This isn't one of those teams where you need the one guy to be the guy who's making plays. Ace is at his best on this team when he's making Yannick better, when he's making everybody else better.
Right. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, they're being the distributor and occasional scorer as opposed to being the primary option. Yeah. So now I want to get to this.
Sometimes, and I remember Penn State played at West Virginia, and I think it was Darren Perry or somebody in football had a pick 6 early in the game. Mm-hmm. And I remember after that game, Joe Paterno saying, sometimes that's the worst thing that could happen to you. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. Mm-hmm. Like, you have a break that goes your way, and you might feel a little too comfortable. And I almost felt that way with Ace yesterday, where he's not been a great three-point shooter this year. 3 fall in the first half. Well, now he's feeling it, and then he goes 1 for 5 in the second half.
Right.
Unfortunately, I kept waiting. Unfortunately, from Penn State's perspective, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop for Indiana, because they've been a terrible three-point shooting team all year.
They're 309.
They made them in the first half, and then they made them in the second half too. So with all the talk about offense, I mean, some games, the problem for Penn State was, you're going to lose games like that. That's how fickle the sport is. Like, Trey Galloway is going to get hot against one team all year, and unfortunately it was Penn State.
Yep.
But they should never, to my view of things, I think this team was good enough that it should have never been in a position where they had so little margin for error down the stretch that you can't really afford to lose that game.
Yeah, Galloway had been 4 for his last 25 in threes entering the game. Like, okay.
So you're sitting there watching it, and he's making these threes, and what are you going to do? Because you can't guard everything. I mean, you have Gallo, who's eating you up inside, who's really good. And if you want to try to stop that, then somebody's going to pop open, and I'm going to take my chances with Galloway. And they actually let Goody free for two good looks in the first half. And I'm like, this is the one guy in the team that could shoot. What are they doing? And they clamped down on him the rest of the game. So they did a decent job on Gallo. I'm okay with him getting his so long as Yannick wasn't getting into foul trouble.
Right.
And they did a good job on Goody. And then somebody else steps up and has a career game against you. Go figure.
Yeah, go figure. So, Mike, 9 months ago, when they came out with the proposal or the decision that they were going to have 15 out of 18 go to the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah.
I'm not even remotely thinking Penn State's in this spot. I'm thinking Penn State, hey, look, at worst is going to be middle of the pack somewhere, somewhere between 7 and 11. At worst, a couple breaks, maybe a little better. Well, I felt pretty good about what I saw. Over here in the back, got it completely wrong. But I was critical of the proposal, saying that, hey, look, I'm sorry, everybody should get a chance to go to the conference tournament, especially in a conference that has this kind of money. Well, now Penn State's in this spot, so I don't want it to sound like sour grapes. That's why I point out the 9 months ago. It's not being sour grapes. I've felt this way since day one. How have you felt about 3 being left out of the conference tournament, which, by the way, is also the same format in the ACC?
No, it's stupid. I mean, you have the great thing about college basketball is anybody has a chance, or anybody should have a chance. And that's the beauty of it. You could be the last place team. And, Steve, we have seen the last place team in the Big Ten make runs at the tournament.
Yes.
Or teams in the bottom couple. I mean, it's not unheard of. And that's what makes it so much fun. And when you're at those tournaments, and I know you've been at the tournaments, and when you're not calling a game, when you were watching a number 14 seed or a number 11 seed getting the best of whomever they were playing, the entire arena is rallying behind them.
Of course.
So, I think it makes zero sense whatsoever. And I feel bad that Mike wasn't asked about it until yesterday.
Yeah.
And that is on those of us who cover the team, because I guarantee you he would have said the exact same thing, maybe not using the exact same words, but I think he would have had the same feeling had we asked him about that when it actually happened. Mm-hmm. And so that's on the beat writers, including me, for not bringing that up earlier, because I don't think that was sour grapes on his part. I think that's how he genuinely feels.
Yeah, no, I anybody who thinks it's sour grapes are complaining. I mean, like I said, that's why I pointed out when it came out 9 months ago. I looked at it and went, what? You're going to do what? And I said, you're putting 3 coaches. And I'm not even remotely thinking Penn State's in this spot. I felt Penn State was in a good spot 9 months ago. So I'm not thinking about that. But I'm looking around, and I thought it was wrong, and I think it's wrong now. It just turns out Penn State's in this spot. The next thing is the college football playoff. They can't decide on doing 1 through 12, and I think after thinking about it, I think I get it now, Mark. If I'm the Mountain West commissioner, and instead of getting $4 million for playing a first-round game, I get $8 million because I'm automatically into the quarterfinals, I'm not voting for this proposal.
Right. I know. But I wish they would just go with what's worked forever in the NCAA tournament, right?
Yeah,
I mean, just at a smaller scale. See teams where they belong. I mean, and I get that may be difficult, especially when you, as you say, when you're talking about the Mountain West, when you look over to Big Ten and SEC and look at the TV deals that these people have and how much money they're bringing in. So I get it from the quote-unquote little guy standpoint. But I just think from the overall standpoint, just seed it the way they do the NCAA basketball tournament. I mean, 1 to 12, we don't care where you finish. It's going to be, this is how it's going to be seeded. So that's my opinion, but I understand, I'm not somebody who's at one of these smaller schools.
Right. Right, exactly. Spring practice will end up starting on the 25th of March, then Pro Day is the 28th. Any thoughts about what you are at least looking for in spring practice, and how do you feel about Nebraska, USC, Texas now starting to lead what appears to be a trend towards spring games disappearing?
Yeah, first, let me do the first part. I think they're just punishing their fans. I think there are ways of doing the quote, again, I'm sorry for using air quotes here. I'm like, people can see me, I'm on the radio. But it doesn't have to be a spring game. It could be a glorified practice. That's basically what Penn State's been doing.
Sure.
And people still enjoy it. It gives you an opportunity to go and tailgate when the weather's nice, which, and have some fun. So I just think they're penalizing their fans. I don't agree with that. I think there are ways you can do it that you can have a practice and you don't really have to show anybody anything. If you're worried about losing games, if Matt Rule was honest about that, and I like Matt Rule, but if he's really worried about people seeing his players, first of all, if he's worried about people getting scouting information, that's crazy. Number two, if he's worried about people seeing some young players who are really good and then trying to pilfer them, as if they're not going to find that out anyway, I just don't know. But with respect to Penn State's spring practice, I think there's two positions that you really have to zero in on. I know everybody's talking about you lose Abdul Carter and you lose Tyler Warren, but they have so much talent at tight end. And that even Rappleyea, who didn't play last year, we'll see where he is physically, but they're going to be just fine at tight end. And they have talent at DN too. To me, it's wide receiver. You lose two guys in the portal. You have Liam Clifford coming back. It's going to be interesting to see what we see from Caden Saunders, the two transfers, and some young players. I mean, there's an opportunity for people to really step up, and somebody's going to have to step up. I mean, it's just an area that hasn't produced consistently for them the last couple of years. And then over on defense, I really think the most important loss on defense to me, and this is with all due respect to Abdul, who's tremendous, but you do have Denai Dennis Sutton and some other players coming back. But Kobe King, I mean, I thought he was underrated last year. I thought he played extremely well for the majority of the season. That's your Mike linebacker. That's the guy who Dan Connor's talking to in the helmet. He's arranging things, I think, not only as a physical player, but as an intelligent player out there who's going to step in and fill that role. We had the opportunity on Saturday to talk to Tamir Robinson. I'd love to see what he's all about. He's a big physical guy, but we just don't know. I think he'll be a good player. Wiley, I think he'll be a good player, but we just don't know. And I think that's such a critical position in a defense, especially with a new coordinator coming in.
Yeah, and I think on the spring game front, spring games to me were going to be actually a little more valuable this year to some of the walk-ons because rosters are being cut to 105, and people need landing spots. Yeah. And I think that's something that may not have been taken into consideration by some people canceling in this particular year. Years gone down the road.
Are you suggesting, Steve, that people in sports have made rash decisions without considering all the ramifications? Is that what you're saying?
I usually feel like the top of the pyramid does that sometimes at the conference level, while I feel like the administrators and the coaches care a lot. But I always feel like at the conference, at the let's negotiate the TV contract level, it's not about the kids, despite what they say.
No, let's play games on Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays. Have them as close together as possible, and travel to the opposite coast and play within a day of each other. Yeah, those things are crazy.
It's all about the kids, Mark. All right. Yeah. Appreciate it. Thanks so much, and for the incredible comments, especially about Lou.
Yeah, he's going to be missed, and my heart goes out to his family, all his friends. Just a great man, and he's going to be missed. But what a legacy he left. So thanks for having me and allowing me to talk about it, Steve.
Absolutely, thank you, Mark. Great stuff as always. All right, this half hour brought to you by our good friends at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Josh Getzoff next here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Party time, game time, or just...
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
fun time. Doesn't matter what time it is, because it's Brewers Outlet time. The Beverage Supermarket has the area's largest beer selection, imports, microbrews, ciders, and domestics. Pick from over 100 ice-cold 12-packs and dozens of 24-ounce singles. Soda, snacks, hot sauces, fresh roasted peanuts. Make it one-stop party shopping, and don't forget the pickle bar. So whatever you're celebrating or just doing it up, Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street, Sunbury wants to see you. And thank you for your years of patronage.
Injury, pain, suffering. People turn to expensive, addictive drugs and surgery before considering other options for pain. Healing, moving, living. Shamokin Dam Health Center treats the cause of your injury, not just the symptoms. To relieve pain and restore your body to health. When you're ready to work again, play again, live again. Call 743-4333.
Shamokin Dam Health Center, designed with you in mind.
Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online, sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai, best in new inventory. Great pre-owned inventory with the Sunbury Motors guarantee. Terrific service department that does a great job, whether it happens to be inspections, routine, difficult, quick lane, whatever it may be. All at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. And Josh Getzoff, the outstanding play-by-play voice of the Penguins, joins us. Josh, welcome back. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, great to be with you again, Steve. It's been a while. I always look forward to our chat, so thanks for having me on.
I do want to start with Mike Lang, and his passing. 46 years, and you were the one entrusted to be in that seat. Where he was in the TV seat for years, and then, of course, you took over in the radio seat before moving over. And what did Mike Lang and his presence mean to you, and what did you learn from him that's so important that you use even today?
You know, it's a question that I found myself asking myself in the days after his passing, Steve. I mean, I think we all, for differing reasons, right? Whether you were a Penguins fan who watched and listened every single night, or you were somebody who worked within the broadcast realm, from a analyst to a fellow play-by-play to a host, as I was when I first came into the scene, and engineers, anything like that, producers, directors. A lot of people crossed paths with Mike over his 46 years here, and a lot of people were impacted by him and felt like, whether they were physically alongside him or just listening to him or watching him, that they had a relationship with him. And I was one of the very, very lucky people that my relationship was a real beyond, just listening and watching to him. I got to work with him. I got to learn from him. I got to talk to him regularly. And when I think about how much he meant to me, I mean, I said it on the air before our game against the Flyers on Tuesday, and I mean, it's true. I'm not saying anything that's not, that I think anybody who has followed my career with the Penguins wouldn't disagree with, that there's zero chance that I'm in the TV seat right now. There's zero chance I'm probably calling Penguins games, if not for Mike Lang, because he believed in me enough, for whatever reason. When we first met, he took me under his wing and saw something that I didn't even realize that I had, and really coached me along and brought me through the process and made me feel comfortable, and at the same time was a guy that was a sounding board. And from what I've learned, there wasn't always that kind of relationship that he had with a lot of younger broadcasters that he would come across. He was always gracious with his time. He was always willing to talk to young broadcasters and teach them the ways, but the ability that I had to really be with him from our line of work was unique. And I think about him, every day. I thought about him a lot during the game in Philly on Tuesday, just because it was our first that we actually did on Sportsnet Pittsburgh since his passing. And I'll think about him every time I do a game, and it's weird still not to hear from him or not to exchange text messages with him. after Penguins games and in between games, and just get his thoughts on various things. So it's sad times, but it's also happy times because the memories are plentiful with him, and there's a lot of great ones.
Yeah, Josh, there's something when I think when you're a play-by-play voice of a team, that there's a trust between management, coaches, players, and broadcaster, and there's a trust between broadcaster and what the franchise means and the fans. And I felt Mike had that, and you obviously have that. I mean, you get that, but is that something you picked up from Mike about that, how important that trust across the board has to be?
Oh, 100%. I think, one of Mike's biggest things that he said to me when I first got here, this is before I was even calling any games, he said just, the thing about Pittsburgh, and all he could really speak to was Pittsburgh, having done the majority of his career, well, really his whole play-by-play career here, is you got to go where the people are. You got to be physically present. You can't just be the guy calling the games and no one sees or hears from you otherwise. And I really took that to heart. I mean, I understand what he means by that. It's not just talking to fans at games. It's going out in the community. It's being seen and just being engaging when you're around people. And I really believe that that's a big part of the role that we have here. And I know you feel the same way at Penn State. It's when you cross paths with fans, when you cross paths in the community, you want to be somebody who's more than just the guy who calls the games. You want to be a part of the community. You want to be a difference maker within your friends and your neighborhood on a day-to-day basis. And I think Mike was, and he kind of laid the foundation for me to also take that route. Here in Pittsburgh, and my wife and I are really involved in a lot of organizations. It's really become our home, and it's a special place, and he paved the way, in a lot of ways for me to be where it is right now.
All right, so the current team right now, I went to the January 11th game with Ottawa. Took children, grandchildren. To be honest with you, John, I know it was a 5-0 Ottawa win, but we had a complete blast. And I want to tell you right now, the Penguins people, ushers, could not have treated us any better. I mean, are we going back? Of course we are. Now, we wanted to see goals.
I wanted to call some that day, too. I remember that game.
Yeah. I mean, when Kachuk and Sanderson were scoring for Team USA, I said, remember, we saw those guys. But the Penguins are in an interesting spot right now between massive youth and older, great, legendary players. How important is this offseason going to be to then try and get the right mix back?
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. You use the word interesting. I would say it is interesting. It's also, let's just call it for what it is. It's difficult right now with what the situation is that they have in their organization, because they have obviously missed the playoffs the last 2 years. They're not looking like they're going to snap that streak this year with how far they sit out with about 20 games left to play. They have this mix of players that Kyle Dubas has brought in, I think, with the intention of, potentially seeing if they have a good year and flipping them. And guys that come to mind in that front are Anthony Beauvillier and Matt Grzelcyk. And then you have guys like Noel Acciari that'll be floated out there in the next couple of days to try to be moved around and try to replenish some more of what he's done here over the last year in stockpiling his system and stockpiling his prospect pool. And I will say that he's really transformed that. And I don't know how many people really have paid attention to what he's done on the surface. Or I think they've seen what he's done on the surface, but I don't know if people have paid attention to what has been happening deeper in that prospect pool over the last, 12 months or so. You really go back to that Jake Gensel trade. This was a group that, when he inherited it, out of 32 teams in the NHL, was routinely ranked 30th or 31st. And there was a reason for that. I think we all know it. First-round picks were mortgaged and sent away for players that could give this team an opportunity to win Stanley Cups. And I don't think anyone regrets those kind of trades. When you're in the moment, you're trying to find a way to get back to the top of the mountain once again. And quite honestly, they owed it to the teams they had at those times to try to go for it. But what they've been able to do here this last year plus is they've had a lot of draft picks. And I think, it's always way too early to tell. But I think what Kyle Dubas has done is he's actually hit on a few of these picks, and that's half the battle. When you have a ton of picks, that's nice. But when you bring in and you select players that clearly have an ability to potentially play at the National Hockey League level and make an impact, that takes it a step further. And he showed the ability to do that when he was at Toronto. He drafted a lot of really good players with the Leafs. But these two drafts he's had here in Pittsburgh, the first was Braden Yeager, who obviously was traded for Rutger McGroarty this past offseason, and Rutger's a part of the Penguins' future, no doubt. I would expect him on the team next year. But, then he's got the guys he picked up in the Jake Gensel trade. Billy Koivunen was named the AHL's Rookie of the Month in January and is having a monster year in Wilkes-Barre Scranton. Vasily Ponomarev is more of a grittier guy, but a guy that has seen some time already with the Penguins this year, and I think is a possible option for deeper in the lineup next year. Still a young guy in his career. The draft pick they got for Jake Gensel ended up being Harrison Brunick, and I don't know if you remember this preseason, but that kid almost made the team as an 18-year-old. He blew everybody away, and he's going to be one to watch this summer and going into next year because everyone's excited about his progress. And then, they have Owen Pickering, who showed himself really well in his first dose in the NHL this year. And a couple other guys down there, and Tristan Brose, that's been having a monster year as well. So all of a sudden, this prospect pool is now ranked 17th, and that doesn't sound that good. But when you consider a 14-point jump, and they're going to have at possible two first-round picks this year, at the minimum, they'll have 3 first-round picks in the next 2 years. It's going to only increase. And he said, he wants to turn this thing around in a hurry. He's put himself in a position with all these draft picks to do that because I don't think he's going to use all of them as far as picking players. I think he's going to use some of them to make trades and acquire players. And that obviously could bolster this Penguins roster.
Interesting net situation. What's your impression of Yoel Blomqvist? And I think I saw one of Tristan Jarry's last games as in a Pittsburgh Penguins uniform. What about his status right now?
Yeah, well, it's been a battle for him. I think it's fair to say that, they, in the Penguins' defense and in Tristan's defense, there was a mutual understanding that this guy needed to get himself back on the track field and figure things out. Because it's been a struggle this entire year for him. Really, you go back to last season when Alex Nedeljkovic started the final 12 games of a season that ended up missing the playoffs, including that last game last year in Long Island, which I think raised a lot of eyebrows because they were already eliminated, and the choice was made to go to Nedeljkovic over Tristan Jarry, and I think that kind of spoke volumes of how everyone felt about Tristan at the time then. And, when you look at this season, it just has never really gone the way that I think he or the Penguins mapped out. He's down in Wilkes-Barre. I'd be very surprised, unless there's a couple injuries to the goaltenders, I'd be very surprised if he comes back up to Pittsburgh this year. Right. And I feel like Yoel Blomqvist, when I look at him, is he ready to play in the NHL full-time? Probably not. But not everybody's ready when it comes time to get called up to the NHL, and they got to figure it out. So he's been doing that this year. He's shown flashes. I think he'll benefit from a full off-season workload, and he'll probably go back down to Wilkes-Barre for the Calder Cup playoffs, I would assume, as well. But the goaltending is interesting because they have some good young goalies, Blomqvist being one of them. Sergei Murashov's the one everyone's talking about, who's been deeper in the depth chart, but that's just because of numbers, and has really lit it up in the ECHL and a brief stint in the AHL as well. So we'll see where it goes. Nedeljkovic is under contract next year as well, and Jarry obviously has a few more years left. So there's quite a bit to figure out on that front, but they do have some promising pieces deeper in the arsenal.
Finally, about Four Nations. Now, next year it's the Olympics in Milan Corvino, and the NHL will be there for the first time since 2014. What did that do, Four Nations, for hockey in this country, especially when it was juxtaposed against the NBA All-Star Weekend, which was not exactly a winning show?
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, the NHL's had a lot of All-Star weekends that went at the root of the NBA, and I think that was part of the thinking with the Four Nations. And, man, they hit it out of the park. I have to be honest, I was one of the people going into that tournament. Not that I wasn't going to watch, but I had zero expectation that it would reach the level of intensity or attention that it did over that 10-week span. But you couldn't look away. It was amazing. the best hockey I've seen in a long time. They called it best on best. I still am one of those people that kind of says hand up. It's not truly best on best with some of the countries that were not involved, but for what they had in that tournament, and I think everyone can agree the two best countries in the world right now are the U.S. and Canada. To have them face off twice on different stages, and then that final go to overtime. I mean, it was unbelievable hockey. It was exceptional to watch. For the teams to come together so quickly was impressive. I actually spent a lot of time yesterday with Mike Sullivan, and we were talking about the tournament, and he was just blown away by it. And he said, the juices that it got flowing for the Olympics, both internally for USA Hockey, but also around the world, it was palpable coming out of it. And people are excited, and it's going to have a lot of energy going into Italy next winter. But I will say, one thing that Mike Sullivan said was pretty interesting, and I would agree with him, is that because of the attention that this tournament got and because of the excitement that this tournament generated, much like some of these previous U.S. hockey teams, this group of guys that just played these 4 games over the span of 10 days, 11 days, there's young kids in the United States that just watch that happen that want to play hockey right now. Yep. And that are jumping into hockey. And that's the best kind of impact in that stage, in that short span that you could hope for. And I think they nailed it.
I think they nailed it as well, because all I know is that when I wasn't doing basketball, I was sitting there watching 3 hours of hockey. So, Josh, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for your time and your thoughts on Mike. And I know you've got a lot going on, and we appreciate it.
You got it, guys. Yeah, anytime. Great to talk to you again, Stephen. I'm sure we'll catch up down the line.
Sounds great. The outstanding Josh Getzoff, the great play-by-play voice of the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll wrap it up in a moment here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Party time, game time, or just fun time. Doesn't matter what time it is, because it's Brewers Outlet time. The Beverage Supermarket has the area's largest beer selection. Imports, microbrews, ciders, and domestics. Pick from over 100 ice-cold 12-packs and dozens of 24-ounce singles. Soda, snacks, hot sauces, fresh roasted peanuts. Make it one-stop party shopping, and don't forget the pickle bar. So whatever you're celebrating or just doing it up, Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street, Sunbury wants to see you. And thank you for your years of patronage.
Hi, this is Season. For over 100 years, the Purdy Insurance Agency has been protecting families and businesses of the greater Susquehanna Valley and beyond. With the experience of our trained and knowledgeable staff, you can rest assured that your needs will be evaluated and met by some of the industry's best representatives. No matter what your insurance needs are, call Purdy Insurance today at 570-286-5855. Visit our website at purdyinsurance.com or check us out on Facebook to see what we can do for you.
This winter has been cold, but Sunbury Motors Hyundai says, let's be alive in 2025 and heat things up with their huge selection of new Hyundais now. Hurry into SMC and drive away in a 2025 Hyundai Elantra for under $22,000. That's right, a 2025 Elantra starts at just $21,728 with up to $1,792 off or 3.99% financing for 60 months. And there's 22 to choose from. 2025 all-wheel drive Hyundai Tucsons start at only $29,161. With up to $27,414 off or 2.49% financing for 60 months. And there's 42 available. Sunbury Motors continues to be this area's mid-size SUV leader with up to $6,524 off the newly redesigned 2024 Hyundai Santa Fe's or 2.99% financing for 72 months, and they start at only $40,431. They have 5 that must go now, and all have America's best warranty. Sunbury Motors Hyundai in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury.